Named for the weathered outcrop that rises along the eastern edge of the centre of town, Broken Hill is well known for its long history of mining and technological innovation, with over a century of built and social history. And yet, other histories of the social worlds, the families and communities that made up the town, and the multiculturalism that has always played a part in the town's formation and success are less known.
Look, the mosque is so important to Broken Hill because it represents another element of our history, and it's about the diversity of our community.
The first to be built in New South Wales, a mosque has stood on this site since 1887. The area was a Ghan town, a camp where Afghan cameleers would live and rest while not out droving. The task of restoring the mosque was completed in 2019, but what restoration means and the reason buildings are restored is more complex than just putting everything back the way it used to be. A common question that is asked is, how do you actually know what to change, what you should keep on a heritage building, what you might be able to make a change to, what is really important, what's not really important. And I guess part of my role as a heritage architect and doing research into these buildings is to actually understand what it is about a place that is important. And sometimes that isn't just about the building itself, it's about what happens in a building, it's about the social history around a building.
I suppose the option there is, are they causing any harm to the building, or does it detract from its story?
Yes.
Is there a reason to remove it or not? And that's probably what we would look for.
There are several approaches to managing heritage. One is that the original building is of greatest significance, and returning the building to its original form is key. Another approach is that the actual evidence of change and the evolution of a building is just as significant. And where not every element might be of equal significance, seeing the change is important. So if we took this back to the original form of the building, as far as we can understand, there was a rectangular building sitting here with a small prayer alcove off it. I think it had a window each side and it was lined with timber boarding. At some point, the community has decided that they want to improve the quality of the building, so they've lined that with pressed metal sheeting.
Yeah, that's right, to make it look smart.
But it's not original fabric. No. It's not part of the original mosque. So the question might arise, is that more or less significant than what was here earlier? Or does it just represent the evolution of a building? Neither of these approaches is inherently more correct. They each have a place in conserving the history of built objects, but it's important to work out why we manage each heritage site. Research has indicated that one of the outbuildings on site originally came from another Ghan town in Broken Hill, located on the corner of Kaolin and Brown Streets. When that camp was no longer in use, the building was transported to its current location. Moving buildings is often seen as not an ideal heritage outcome. However, this building was moved around 100 years ago when a particular use ceased, and it took another use in relation to the mosque that was on the site. There is no right answer to these things.
No, you're right.
You've just got to think it through carefully about what it is that you want to achieve and what is the best heritage outcome at this point. The recent conservation project on the building is one of a series of modifications and restorations that the building has seen across its lifetime. After a period of disuse, it was acquired by Broken Hill City Council and managed by the Broken Hill Historical Society as a museum. Jenny Camilleri, a local resident and historian, has worked with several local history groups.
31 years I've been with the Historical Society.
When the council took over the site in 1967, the buildings were in very poor condition and repair, and work was undertaken by the members of the Historical Society.
Ralph Wallace, who was a former secretary, and a couple of other interested members went down to the mosque and took it on themselves to clean everything out and repair what they could at the time. It was an earth floor. The council got a loan to actually have the floor cemented, because at that particular time we believed the white ants ate the floor away, but it wasn't the case.
In addition to the repair works, the site was rededicated as a place of worship in September 1968, providing a space for prayer for the first time in several decades.
Several years back, people used to go down there to pray. That would have been the 1990s. They were residents here in Broken Hill.
Alongside the restoration and preservation of the building fabric, there have been efforts to preserve items in the museum collection. The role of archives and archivists at a site like the Broken Hill Mosque is essential. They keep materials and objects in conditions that will ensure that they last, and also ensure that future generations can understand not only the material history, but the social history of Broken Hill.
A lot of this material is being lost. People are coming up and clearing their mothers' houses out and just throwing all that information away. So in collecting the information, we're trying to retain it for future generations, and also for researchers to, how did a woman dress herself? What was the quality of the fabric? Was it a wealthy person? Was it a poor person? Where did the fabrics come from? Were they imported? Were they local? So it sort of tells a story within that object itself. We have a linen coat here that was worn on the picnic train. So, and it's got a speck of blood on it. It's just a normal coat, but because of that, there's that social history that this person that wore it was actually there.
Because of the heat, it's not air cooler down there or nothing like that, so a lot of the little exhibits have deteriorated over the time it's been there. Some of it's been removed and stored so that it don't deteriorate any further.
Archives also serve a purpose for the physical restoration. They provide photographs, surveys, maps, and other items that can help piece together the built history of a place at different points in time. Big shed in there.
There's a shed there.
Which must have been in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are plenty of clues, and it's just a matter of putting them together in the right order. At other times, you have to make educated guesses based on the information you have and research on other buildings from a similar period or use. It's really like a giant puzzle, with each dimension serving as a hint to uncovering the whole.
And everything is very simplistic here. All the buildings are a very simple methodology.
Yep.
So I would think the simpler we keep it, the more likely we are to be closer to the mark.
One of the reasons for doing conservation work to a building is not just returning it to an original form or a form that may be significant at some point in history. It's to ensure that the building is still standing in another 50 to 100 years.
Usually we find that we spend more time undoing later works or later repairs because they fail, and we go back on the first system, which usually is far more reliable long-term for the building.
In working out what needs to be restored or replaced, it's necessary to take into account the history of the building, its context, and the materials that would have been used. By doing so, we try to make decisions that reflect the intention of the original builders, or we repair damaged elements while not detracting from their value.
It's a story that's known but hasn't been celebrated or investigated in any great depth that I'm aware of. But those stories, even though they're told outside Broken Hill, they're not really celebrated within Broken Hill.
Conserving a building is not just about building fabric, keeping it standing and maintaining it. There are many aspects of a place that need to be understood. We conserve buildings and places not just to keep them standing, but to give clues to the future about what the history of a place is about.
The mosque plays the element, the romance of the outback. It plays that element about how strong and determined, resilient the communities are, and that we're a very open community. So I think in terms of how it sits with how we recreate Broken Hill, we're not recreating Broken Hill, we're just making it stronger.